Ultimately, because of their sin, the Israelites broke this command and turned to false gods instead. In response to this, God said, quote, "The Israelites have been quick to turn away from what I have commanded them, and have made for themselves an idol cast in the shape of a calf. They have bowed to it and sacrificed to it, and have said, 'These are your gods, Israel, who have brought you out of Egypt.'" End quote. Exodus 32:8. God's chosen people gave into the sinful temptation to worship something other than God, showing that no one is inherently righteous. Despite this, many Christians think, "I wouldn't turn away from God like that. If he commanded me to do something, I would listen." I beg to differ. The modern world has a plethora of idols that people can worship, even unconsciously. Take celebrities for an example. Do you know more about your favorite celebrity than you do about God? You may be an idolater. Do you spend more time scrolling on your phone than you do reading the Bible? You might be an idolater. Now that I have sufficiently riled you all up, let me put your mind at ease by giving you the actual definition of idolatry, which is, quote, "the worship of someone or something other than God as though it were God," end quote, Britannica. I doubt any of you are intentionally worshiping a celebrity, but many people in the world are. But why? To answer this question, we must go back to the Garden of Eden. There, the devil tempted Adam and Eve into sin. The important part is that he tempted them by saying, if they ate of the forbidden fruit, quote, "your eyes would be open and you would be like God," end quote, Genesis 3:5. As we know, mankind cannot be like God because we are sinful. When mankind's attempt to become like God fails, they turn instead to making God like man. This lowers the standard of perfection that men must have to hold and allows them to become the God of their own lives. Or else, people choose something different to fill God's place. This is where celebrity worship comes in. Take Taylor Swift for an example. While I do not personally listen to her music, she has around 100 million monthly listeners on Spotify, and her music is streamed around 250 million times per day, according to Metro UK. The site continues to state that Swift boasts a fan base of over 1 billion people, and given that the global population is around 8 billion, about 22% of the world consider themselves to be fans. I certainly did all of this math all by myself and did not Google how many fans does Taylor Swift have. Regardless, it is apparent that Taylor Swift is an extremely influential person and that many people idolize her. And she isn't the only one. There are many other celebrities that people idolize, whether they are musicians, actors, sports figures, even politicians. But how did we get here? Ancient civilizations didn't have celebrities, did they? Or did they? I am proud to introduce you to the, let's say, Taylor Swift of the ancient times. With a name that is hard to forget and even harder to pronounce, he was thought to be a mix of the original man and a spirit. Ladies and gentlemen, I present the incredible and amazing Wayne Buju. Yes, that really is his name. No, I probably did not say it right. Now we wonder, who were the people who came up with such an interesting name? The answer is the Ojibwe, an ancient Native American tribe who developed a fascinating, though not entirely truthful, account of the biblical flood, where God flooded the earth because of mankind's sin. In the Ojibwe account, we encounter a similar plot, but with idolatrous implications. Introducing the second character in the Ojibwe myth, Gitche Manito. Apparently, these people enjoyed creating humorous names. Gitche Manito was the Ojibwe god, but instead of walking among his creation as the God of the Bible did, Gitche Manito possessed an oddly aloof personality. Instead of warning the Ojibwe to abstain from their sinful practices, Gitche Manito just silently waited for them to mend their ways on their own. Quote, "For a long time, Gitche Manito waited, hoping that the evil ways would cease and that brotherhood, sisterhood, and respect for all things would come to rule over the people. When it seemed there was no hope left, Gitche Manito decided to purify the earth," end quote, flood stories around the world. Without warning, Gitche Manito unleashed a flood on the earth, and most of the animals and people drowned instantly, with the exception of Wayne Buju and a few assorted animals. The earth was entirely covered by water, so the remaining animals attempted to dive down to the bottom of the ocean to retrieve some dirt in order to build a new earth. After much struggle, some dirt was retrieved. Quote, "At that moment, the turtle swam forward and said, 'Use my back to bear the weight of this new earth. With the help of Gitche Manito, we can make a new earth,' end quote." Gitche was so disconnected from his creation that the creatures essentially had to provide a new earth for themselves. The Ojibwe idolized their own power by putting themselves on the level of a god with the ability to create worlds. There is no evidence from the story that Gitche even realized beforehand that a new earth would be needed after he flooded it. The detachment of Gitche provides an excuse for man's sinfulness, since Gitche did not inform the Ojibwe of their misbehavior, nor make any attempts to correct it or remind them of himself. The Ojibwe could effectively blame their sinfulness on their god. Idolatry did not stop there. In fact, it has only become more rampant and dangerous. Unfortunately, it is not uncommon for idolatry to stem from biblical and Christian doctrine, as seen with that twisted flood narrative. And it happened again in the mid to late 1800s with the Native American church. If we just stop there with the title, everything about the religion sounds fine. Even if we go a little further and state that it includes some Christian principles, it still doesn't sound like idolatry. But then we discovered that the Native American church relied heavily on the use of peyote, which is, quote, an alkaloid drug that has hallucinogenic effects, end quote, Britannica. Okay, a religion that intentionally abuses drugs. Not so good. And the worst of it is that, quote, in many tribes, peyote itself is personified as the peyote spirit, which is believed to be either God's equivalent to the Indians to his Jesus for the whites, or Jesus himself, end quote. Peyotists literally believe that Jesus is a drug, and that when they take the drug, they are able to commune with God. Pretty weird, right? I mean, nowhere in the Bible does it say that we must get high on Jesus for salvation. If one's God is a hallucinogenic drug, which puts its users into a state of confusion and an inability to know what is real and what is fantasy, then the standard for perfection is completely non-existent. The effects of peyote are relative to each consumer, meaning that their supernatural enlightenment would differ from person to person. With this, idolatry began to transition from pantheons and nature to self. Focusing on the self gives an opportunity for everyone's supernatural insight to be correct, even if their hallucinogenic visions were contradictory. By worshiping a drug as God, peyotists created a situation where they were a god themselves, and their idolatry completely negated the standard of perfection. So far, we have covered idolatrous beliefs that contain people with funny names, aloof gods, and drug addicts. If that wasn't alarming enough, my next example of idolatry concerns the worship of science and the idea that humans can be God. During the Enlightenment, which was a period of exploring new ideas of thought, the concept of scientism was born. Quote, the most common way of defining scientism is to say that it is the view that science reveals everything there is to know about reality. Scientism is an attempt to expound the boundaries of science in such a way that all genuine knowledge must be either scientific or at least reducible to scientific knowledge, end quote, scientism. In plain English, scientism is a reckless over-reliance on the ideas of scientific achievement through human effort. Those who subscribe to scientism are arrogant enough to think that they can become like God by reducing all human questions to scientific answers. Now that's a real modest and humble view of oneself, isn't it? Scientism essentially claims that science is God. This is not to say that the field of science in and of itself is idolatrous, but it does become an idol when people rely too heavily on it and look to it for supreme authority. Scientism stretches the bounds of science into realms it really shouldn't be applied to, such as morals and ethics. Scientism intends to undermine religion by basing reality in science, not in one holy creator. The fact that people place their ultimate and complete trust in science and believe that it has absolute authority and the ability to answer all questions shows that science has become a god to some people. Scientism ultimately leads its pursuers to play at being God. Quote, Stephen Hawking writes that when a satisfactory cosmological theory has emerged, we shall all, philosophers, scientists, and just ordinary people be able to take part in the discussion of the question why it is that we in the universe exist. If we find the answer to that, it would be the ultimate triumph of human reason, for then we would know the mind of God, end quote, musically. Here the devil's original lie that man can be like God springs up once again. Knowing the mind of God implies that humans would be on the same level of omniscience as God. This is simply untrue because mankind has been imperfect and flawed from the time Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit. Man can never become equal to God because of his sinful state. This is why scientism is such a dangerous idol. It discounts God and tries to promote the accomplishments of man. Idolizing science will only lead deeper into sin, as people worship what was created instead of the one who created it. Quote, frightful it must be, for supremely frightful would be the effect of any human endeavor to mock the stupendous mechanism of the creator of the world, end quote, Shelley. Mankind's attempts at glory are pitiful next to the omnipotent creator, the all-powerful God. Isn't it sad to think of all the people who have wasted their lives trying to find fulfillment in science instead of God? Idolatry in the form of scientism shows how mankind continues to sinfully desire to be the God of their own lives. We have seen how idolatry has, well, I don't want to say progressed, but how idolatry has developed over history. It is clear that mankind has always desired an idol for himself. But before we return to Taylor Swift, however, we must discuss what I would call the first true celebrity, the one who started it all, Elvis Presley. In 1956, the rock and roll singer captivated the public with his wildly popular record, Heartbreak Hotel, and quote, over the next 2 years, he emerged as the most popular musician in American history. His incomparable voice drove young people wild and earned him millions of fans, end quote. He inspired many people, and many musicians claim that they owe their success to him. Soon after Elvis passed away, Bruce Springsteen said of him, quote, it was like he whispered his dream into all of our ears, and then we dreamed it, end quote. Even after his passing, Elvis is still one of the most loved stars of all time, and people mourned his death by flocking to his estate every August on the anniversary of his passing. Such devotion to an imperfect man can only be described as idolatrous worship. The dedication that many people show to their favorite celebrity mimics the behavior of the ancient people groups who worship false pantheons and is equally sinful. As Dana Brush states, quote, the elevation of a celebrity is a dangerous business, both for the fan and the celebrity. The elevated stage or the big screen, the red carpet and the bright lights, the autographs and the screaming fans, we do realize, don't we, that these things stand in direct opposition to the humility commanded in Scripture? The stage plays to an old human weakness too, idolatry. Humans have desired an object of worship from day one. The rock star with a tragic good looks feels much more palatable than a God who asks us to take up our cross, end quote. The fact that many people would prefer to worship an imperfect singer rather than God shows that people crave a lower standard to uphold. When the criterion for perfection is lowered to that of a flawed and sinful man like Elvis Presley, mankind feels that they are less depraved and then are justified in their sin. This devotion to celebrities has only worsened over the time. Taylor Swift is described as a global superstar by Encyclopedia Britannica, and, quote, more and more people have begun to identify not just as Taylor Swift fans, but as zealots devoted to everything surrounding her, end quote, Johnson. People choose to dedicate large amounts of their time and devotion, not to mention money, to their obsession over Swift. Gabrielle Lask, who is a huge Swift fan, recalls paying $4,000 to attend one of Swift's era tour shows with her mother. Quote, it's so much money, Lask says. I honestly don't think I've ever spent that much money on anything in my entire life, but I was dying to go to that show. My mom surprised me with tickets for my 11th birthday for the Fearless tour, and this would be a full circle moment for us to go back together, end quote. Lask said that she took $3,000 out of her savings account, while her mother paid for her flight and hotel accommodations. Despite the substantial sum of money, Lask thoroughly enjoyed the concert, saying that it was worth the cost. Quote, she's my favorite artist, and she's released so much new music since her last tour, I couldn't miss it, Lask says. It was so amazing I cried multiple times. It was surreal being there after the battle and uncertainty of getting tickets. I just couldn't believe I was there, end quote. Lask is only one example of many. Swift fans' extreme dedication of time and finances show more than just a passing admiration. They illustrate extreme celebrity worship. Idolization of celebrities takes the attention, adoration, and accolades that should be given to God, and it directs them toward humans instead. By fixing their attention on a flawed and sinful singer like Taylor Swift, mankind has again diminished the standard of perfection to that of a mere human through idolization. Similar to the pantheons of ancient times, celebrity idolization strives to both lower the perfection standard and find an earthly replacement to worship instead of the one and only perfect God. Through these examples, it is apparent that idolatry is sinful because it promotes mankind and earthly objects instead of God. Entertainment, celebrities are inescapable in modern life, and everyone likes to watch a good movie every now and then. But this begs the question, is it sinful to enjoy movies, music, or sports? Is it sinful to have a favorite celebrity? Just like most things in life, I would say that moderation is key. I certainly enjoy certain bands over others, but I limit myself to enjoying their music, not worshiping and idolizing the band. It isn't necessarily sinful to have a favorite celebrity, but we must be careful that this celebrity does not become an idol. The devil's lie that mere humans can become like God continues to this day to cause us to desire to be our own God. People think that whatever they idolize will give them salvation, or at least help them to feel less lost. This is completely false, as idolatry only leads people further away from the truth. Quote, those who cling to worthless idols turn away God's love for them, end quote, Jonah 2:8. Instead of relying on idols, we are commanded to flee idolatry in 1 Corinthians 10:14. As Christians, we know that we are imperfect and cannot do anything worthy or good on our own, and are reliant on God for salvation. Through acknowledging Christ's sacrificial death for our sins on the cross, we are forgiven of our sins, including idolatry, and stand redeemed before Christ. By his wounds we have been saved. We understand that there is a perfect, powerful God in control of everything. Quote, many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is God's purpose that prevails, end quote, Proverbs 19:21. Since God works out everything for the good of those who love him, he alone should be praised. And to those of you who disagree, I ask, what has your idol, be it a celebrity, science, or a false religion, what has it ever done for you? No earthly thing can create a perfect plan for you and your life. That power resides in God alone. Idolatry is one of the devil's many methods of leading people astray. Because of this, we must, quote, submit yourselves then to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you, end quote, James 4:7. God will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you can bear, and he will always provide a way of escape. Idolatry of objects and oneself is a grievous sin, but God's forgiveness is open to those who seek it. Christians must strive to follow God's commands while remaining completely humble and submitted to him, remembering their sinfulness. Although idols and their imperfection may seem more palatable and relatable to worship, they will ultimately only lead to destruction and not salvation. True salvation is a gift from God, and all of our worship and praise should go to him because of his great love. Quote, see what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God, end quote, 1 John 3:1. It is apparent that God, not an idol, should be receiving all of the worship we can give, because he alone is highest of all. Thank you.